Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network and a part of lowerbroadhockey.com. My name is Braden Gall, and you can follow me on the internet at Braden Gall.
And I'm Emma Lingan, and you can follow me everywhere except Blue Sky, apparently, at Emma_Lingan.
I'm going to get you over there, man. Why are you so apprehensive to Blue Sky? The humidity is low. The skies are clear. It's wonderful.
Not apprehensive. I'm honestly just lazy, and there's too many of these platforms to keep up with. So I want to see if this one really has staying power before I fully commit.
Nate says this is not a good sign to start the show with this comment, but Nate says my family hasn't been to or watched a game on TV since October or November and haven't missed it at all. Woof. But I always catch your show because of the entertainment value. Thank you. You ended with a flourish there, Nate. We do appreciate it. Always good to hear from you, Nate. Hope things are going well. Look, you missed a good one last night. They played one of their best games of the entire year, at least one of the best two periods of the entire year. We'll get to that game, of course, and what we saw over the weekend with Ovechkin and the Capitals doing all the things that they've done. And most importantly, though, Barry Trotz on his weekly radio hit on 102.5, of course, talked a lot about the trade deadline, a lot about Ryan O'Reilly, clarified some of the stuff that was out in the report from Elliot Friedman on Sunday, or on Saturday night, excuse me. I've actually got that clip. We'll play that clip for you here coming up in just a second. So we'll talk about the trade deadline strategy for the Nashville Predators. Emma, I want to get your thoughts on what players should or shouldn't be looked at, what types of moves this team should or shouldn't be doing, and some of the strategy moving forward. And, of course, a celebration tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. Tomorrow night at Bridgestone Arena with David Poile, Shea and Pekka Rinne, the first Hall of Fame class in team history going in there. So we'll do that a little bit later on. So some positive stuff here on the show to talk about on a team in a season that hasn't had a lot of positive stuff to talk about. How about that, Emma? How about that?
I know. Never thought we'd see the day, but here we are. Happy, talking about happy thoughts.
There you go. Two more major positive notes for the show. Notes. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages. You guys have heard, perhaps, that they sponsor the show. We have mentioned them on the show before. Sinkers Beverages. I'm wearing the hat right here. They got nice merch. They got nice gear. Shotgun Willie's does as well. So make sure you go check them out. Look, I know we joked about dry January last week. Is the birthday happened or is it coming up?
It's on Sunday.
Okay, it's coming up. All right. So I would like a full report on the birthday coming up. Happy birthday, early birthday to you, Emma. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
What is Mr. Lingan getting you for birthday?
That's a great question. He is taking me to dinner. But I kind of had to nudge him in the right direction of where I wanted to go to dinner. But
Shotgun Willie's Barbecue famously not open for dinner.
So that takes that off the list. Yes. Yeah. But dinner and TBD. We'll see.
Nate, do we have another? I looked at, I know we've got like 20-degree temps next week, a couple of more cold days, but do we actually have an ice storm coming on Sunday? Is that
not?
That's what the comment section is reporting.
I was born in an ice storm, which my mother loves to remind me of every year around my birthday, about how they, risked death getting to the hospital and how I was almost born in a fire station and all of that. How she had to sit on her butt and scoot across the icy driveway so she didn't fall down. So yeah, I don't need more of that.
My kids are just now back in school full time. I really don't need school to be closed next week. It's been the best work week I've had in a long time this week so far. The house is empty. I have it to myself. My office is now my office again. It's great. There's not little 6 and 8 year olds running around asking for shit all the time. I love you guys. If you ever watch this later on in life, I love you. I love you both very much. Eddie says, yeah, team is really having fun screwing up my tank for Hagens. That's still very much a possibility. They absolutely, especially since the Schaefer kid appears to be the number 1 overall pick. Barry Trotz said that just openly yesterday in his interview. He's like, yeah, Schaefer's pretty clearly number 1.
Barry Trotz just says everything that comes into his head, and I, for one, love it. I'm so here for it.
I appreciate it. Genius marketing for Sinkers to sponsor Nashville sports shows this year. Look, if you're talking about the fact that all of the professional sports teams in this market are forcing you to drink, then yes, Josh, I completely agree with you. Vanderbilt football, the best sporting event in the city in this particular calendar year.
Just like we all drew it up.
And if look again, I'm doing the relatively dry January. That's what I'm doing. It's mostly dry January, almost dry January.
Damp January.
What is it?
A damp January? I don't know. I just made that up.
Yeah. So I'm, I've cut way back. It took me like 12 days before I had anything to drink at all into the new year. I had something for the Packers game on Sunday, which also, much like Nashville sports, makes you want to have a cocktail. But no, they've got great non-alc stuff. They've got fantastic THC beverages, which are legal in this state and very good for your health. So go check those out. Lots of cool stuff over there. If you need any mixers, any tools for your bar, they've got you covered over there. 4-time liquor store of the year, and you can have that booze delivered directly to your house. Search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, and sign up for the in crowd as well. They do all kinds of really awesome allocations. So on Fridays or once a month, they'll drop some stuff. And if you're in the in crowd, they'll make sure you get priority on some of that stuff. So go check them out. And the best brisket in the city, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, right there in the heart of Madison. It's right there off Briley Parkway. You can get from Bridgestone Arena to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue in less than probably like 10 minutes. And you can access every part of the city because it's right off Briley and I-65 north and south. So Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Sinkers Beverages, at Emma_Lingan on Blue Sky. You can get to her there. Okay. All right. So let's start with the game itself. I mean, look, I was not in the locker room after the game. I would be fascinated to know, because I think it was in the first intermission where Forsberg was just like, yeah, we forechecked. And I was like, that's what it looked like. They gave up a couple of goals. They gave up a natural hat trick. It wasn't without flaws, and it wasn't without tension and nerves. But it was one of the better games they played against the best team in the NHL at home. Jonathan Marchessault against his former team. The top line played very well, and they did it without UC Saros. So I think, look, there you have to find the moments of joy in this season. You can still root for the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick and have enough draft capital to trade up to get the Hagens kid out of Boston College if you want him and think he's the best. And still also every now and then enjoy a really good game that your team plays at home against a great opponent. I just think it's okay to celebrate some of the joys and the victories when they come, Emma. I think it's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Especially for those of us who do this for a living. It makes the job more fun when they are winning. Even just one game. It's more fun. But yeah, it was like you said, not without flaws, kind of a tale of two games a little bit. The first period, Nashville, of course, the score at the end of the first period was 2-0 Nashville. But even aside from the score, it was like they were just taking it to Vegas. I mean, if you watched that period, you would not have thought that Vegas was the top team in the West and Nashville wasn't, because they were absolutely just, the thing with Vegas, and I think the thing that separates the really good teams in this league from other teams in this league it's not just talent, right? Because every team has talent. This is the best league in the world. It's the ability to take advantage of opportunities and being opportunistic. And so Nashville really just did not give Vegas any opportunities in the first 35 minutes of the game. Really just did not.
Yep.
They just took away all of those opportunities. And then you get to the end of the second period, they did give Vegas those opportunities. And because Vegas is a really good team, they took advantage of them. So that's how you end up 4-2 at the end of the second period. And the pendulum completely swung the other way, because I think shots after the first period were 11-1 in favor of Nashville. Middle of the second period, it was a little more even. It was 10-8 still Nashville. But then the third period was the complete reverse of the first, where at one point it was 10-1 in favor of Vegas. So you could see that I think Vegas scored on it was 2 goals in their first 6 shots. So they were definitely, taking advantage of those opportunities. You could see it.
How very capitals of them.
Yes, and you could see it kind of suck a little bit of the air out of the Predators, but because they had built that 4-0 lead, almost blew it, but they had built that 4-0 lead, they were able to hang on. Justus Annunen had a couple, again, those first 2, but that, I think that the third goal, regardless, I think he came up with some big saves at the end there, kept it 4-3. Then obviously O'Reilly scores into the empty net, so it's 5-3. But yeah.
Was the power play goal the one that was like 4 seconds into the power play? Was the third goal? Was that the second goal? 7 seconds. Okay.
7 seconds. Yes.
Yeah. Nice coverage. I don't think Onanen could have done anything about that. That's just a brilliantly executed little play. We could talk about the penalty kill on that. It's just nothing is easy with this team. Like, even though you play with you could argue that was the best 30, 40 minutes of hockey that they've played all season, relative to competition and sort of how they played. The forecheck, the aggressiveness, controlling the pace, eliminating, locking down on the defensive end. You could argue that. And then, they do the thing that this team and frankly, lots of team in hockey do over the years, which is just, hold on for dear life. And I do think it's worth noting that they didn't give it up and that they put them away when they had to. I do have some thoughts on who Andrew Brunette put on the ice on that final, 50 seconds. I think that's interesting to note. We can discuss that in a second. But I think, it's just never easy. It's just not. This team doesn't know how to, like. I know they've had a few wins, right, where there's like 4-0 on Winnipeg or 3-0 on somebody else, and it's like they've had a couple of those games this year, but it just doesn't feel like it ever happens. You're just sort of waiting and watching to see if they're going to give it up, and they didn't. And so give them credit for that. And on top of the fact that they played really well, the top line played extremely well, which now feels like is a thing that's going to be for a while, especially considering their contracts. And I don't mean just this year, potentially, with the age and sort of the regression from Nyquist and O'Reilly to some degree. Forsberg, Stamkos, and Marchessault feels like it's working extremely well. They were all over the score sheet last night, all over the offensive zone last night. So really, really good stuff from those guys. Ben says the trap game. Was it a trap game? I try not to be negative, but that's bad. So that's bad for my mental health. But I'm also worried about the mental resilience of this team and what the second goal in when I was very worried, but I'm happy. I was a word salad there, Ben. But I get what you're saying. And it does remind me of the Kings game where I remember talking to somebody at second intermission, and I was like, what is going on? What's wrong with the Kings? And this person from inside the organization looked at me and said, yeah, we're the trap game now. And I was like, oh, and that was weeks and weeks ago. It is what it is now. You're one of the worst teams in the league. People are going to overlook you. You got to take advantage of that if you want to see some joy in your life, not just rooting for the bad draft pick. So we'll see. Do you have any? It sounds like you have some thoughts on the. Okay, I don't remember exactly who was out. It was McCarron. I'm doing this off the top of my head. It was Michael McCarron, Colton Sissons, correct?
And Mark Jankowski.
But here's what I thought was interesting. Justin Barron was taken off for Nick Blankenburg, and Roman Josi was out there. And I thought with Josi and Barron kind of playing together most of the last few games, I thought it was going to be like, are they going to because you got to put Josi out there. And I was like, are they going to put Justin Barron out there with 50 seconds to go, trying to kill a 6-on-5 with a 1-goal lead in the middle of a game that you've played very well in? And nope, they didn't. They put the little slippery guy who can get to the puck and get it out of the zone quickly.
I mean, I want Blankenburg out there over Barron if that's what we're talking about. But to me, the bigger issue is it's a 1-goal game. You got a minute left. What in the ever-loving hell is Michael McCarron and Mark Jankowski and Colton Sissons doing out there? Like, come on.
I know why Colton's out there. Is McCarron out there just to win the draws because he'd had a good night in the circle? He had won like all 6 of his draws or something like that. Is that why?
But he lost that last face-off. Colton Sissons is great in the face-off circle. So again, that makes total sense. I just look, no disrespect, but I mean, everyone has a role to play on the team. And I think that those guys are not the guys that you want out there. But again, going back to Barron for a second, though, he had a beautiful goal in the second period.
It was served up literally on a platter.
Yes. Well, it's funny because the goal itself, the one-timer looked very Roman Josi-esque. So for a second, watching from the press box, and I knew Roman was on the ice, so I thought it was Roman Josi, and then I was like, wait a minute, no, that's Roman who passed to him. Who was that? It's like, oh my god, it's Justin Barron. Now then he proceeded to give away the puck I don't know how many times later in the game. So
Jeff is asking, has Justin Barron adapted to the system better than Shea has, or is he being sheltered by being paired with Josi? Yeah, I don't think Justin Barron is a part of this organization long term.
No. He, and that's fine because he's only signed through next year. He's Honestly, I don't think that he's part of the lineup long term. As soon as Willsby and or Lauzon comes back, I think Justin Barron is immediately the odd man out.
Spencer Stastny is, I mean, he's a starter.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
That's it.
He's fantastic.
End of discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, I would even rather have Mark Del Gaizo in there over Justin Barron, and he's in Milwaukee right now, so that's just where we're at. But
yep.
I think that when it comes to the system and who's adapted, who hasn't, I mean, yes, that goal served up on a platter by Roman Josi. Like I said, came quickly crashing back down to earth with the giveaways in the defensive zone, but it is what it is, I guess.
Shea's a $7 million player, and whether Andrew Burnett's the coach long term or not, he will have long stretches of good hockey. Yeah. It hadn't necessarily happened yet, but like he's going to have good stretches of hockey. He is a long-time NHL defenseman. Justin Barron is not. It's not personal. It just doesn't look good most of the time. And I think it's interesting that they're pairing him with Josi, trying to hide him a little bit on that pairing. And Josi does help carry the weight for a lot of other players that have played with him. But
it's also fine though, because you don't, with the depth in this organization, you don't need him to be a piece of the organization long term. So that's fine. It's not like people who are still mad about the Carrier trade. I'm like, yeah, 1-for-1. Yes, Carrier is obviously the better player, but he became expendable because of the depth that this organization has.
Well, I want to say Willie Donick even said it in the third period about like, well, Barron like handled the puck once or something, and he just kind of said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not going to get it right. I'll forget exactly what he said, but it was kind of like, well, Barron needs to be really careful in the defensive end now, or something like that. And it wasn't like he wasn't calling him out. It wasn't anything like that, but it was very clear that he was alluding to what everyone watching is thinking in the middle of a 1-goal game as they're coming back. And maybe it was a 2-goal game even at that point, or maybe it was like right after the third goal with like 4 minutes to go or something like that. So what about, did you go in to talk to anybody afterward? I'm curious, sort of like, I am curious because Barry Trotz talked about this, and this is sort of an easy way to transition into the next big topic, where he talks about sort of culture trumping everything, and that when you accept losing, that it can kind of stick and it can be in there for longer, and it's harder to change and get it out of there. I don't get the sense that that's ever what any of these guys have ever been okay with or accepted losing. I'm just curious how you've seen this group change over the last, let's say 2 or 3 weeks, where it starts to crystallize very clearly that they are not going to achieve their goals. They're not going to make the playoffs. This is, on pace to be one of the worst seasons in Predators history. They have to be coming to some semblance of grips with that, but at the same time, knowing that they've got to go out and bust their ass on every shift. I'm curious what you sense from how they're talking about the team and the game and the performance both last night and sort of over the last few weeks.
Yeah, after the game, we talked to Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Justus Annunen, and Stamkos actually had some really good comments on exactly that, which was, he kind of gave the standard answer, which is like, we can't control the math. He was basically like, I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out, like, mathematically when our chances are at 0. They're still not, by the way, technically. But he's
2%, 3%.
Hey, it's not 0.
True.
But he can't, he's like, we can't control that, obviously, at this point in the season. But at the end of the day, he's like, we're professional athletes. Like, we get paid to play. We're going to go out and play. It's not in our nature to go out and shit the bed. That's like not what they're trying to do. And so what he said is that, like, the belief in the room has never been an issue. That's never, like, they've never lacked belief in the group. It's just the frustration because they have this belief in the group and they're not producing the results. That is, what ends up weighing you down. And so definitely I've talked to these guys, I don't know how many times now, after games, at practices, before games. There is zero acceptance of losing there is absolutely none of that. It's, there's not just like oh well, ho hum, I guess that's that. But it's almost more of like a fire and anger, because it's like, we should not be this bad. And it's like they see it too. Everyone who's like, they see it too. And so it's just this, there's not an acceptance. It's more of an anger, a frustration.
I might dig into this a little bit over the course of the next few days to get in there and sort of have some conversations with guys. But can you, because the context of the conversation with Barry on 102.5 was around sort of like, hey, do you want to lose a bunch of games and get the number 1-2 pick, or do you want to win about half your games and be top 10ish? And Barry immediately was like, no, that's where he kind of answered that question. He said, look, I don't want to, culture is the most important thing. I don't want to have a culture of accepting losses, and I would probably rather, he basically said, I know it sounds crazy, but I'd rather pick ninth or basically 9 or 10 and win some games and kind of avoid that culture plummet or sort of like erosion of positive culture than to pick 1, 2, or 3. I'm kind of with Stillman on this. I'd rather have Hagens, and the season's already lost. I'd rather have a player that could be franchise changing and pick 2 or 3 than win a few extra games. The question is, can you do both? This is what I'm curious about. Can you do both? Because these guys are all, because the one value of all these pieces being veterans is that they are professionals. They are sort of the consummate pro that knows how to handle losing and winning. Although, not a lot of losing in Steven Stamkos' career in Tampa Bay, just in general. So I'm curious if you could do both. Like, can it's okay now, mid-January, to say, hey, we haven't given up on any of this stuff. We're not. It's only human nature, though. Once you get to end of March, middle of March, February is the month that, when I talk to Hal and C. Mace and all these former players, they all say February is the toughest month of the year. It's absolutely the toughest month of the year, because even if you're winning, it's the toughest month of the year, because you just got to, you're not close enough to the playoffs yet to see the end of the tunnel, and you're just grinding every day. It's human nature to sort of take a breath and take a play off, or take a shift off, or take a practice off when you're not playing for anything in the standings. And so, can you do both? Could you maintain that culture, veteran sort of professional culture of winning, and also end up with like the 4th pick in the draft with some first round extras to move up maybe and get your guy? Like, is it possible?
I don't know. And I mean, like, that's not a situation that many teams find themselves in. I feel like, it's, you kind of got to pick one direction or the other. And with all the Predators fans who are understandably upset with this team's lack of a direction over the last several years, I feel like that's almost not what you would want. I think that, and plus, again, if you're talking about culture above all else, and bringing in these guys because of what they do for the culture, I just don't think it's like, you're talking about human nature. Yes. I don't think it's in Steven Stamkos's nature to be like, just take a few shifts off or whatever it is. I don't think it's in Marchessault's nature. I don't think any of these guys would be comfortable with that. And that's why Barry brought them in the first place.
That's because they took all those shifts off in the first half of the season.
Well,
I'm kidding. I think that ultimately falls on the head coach, the coaching staff, the veterans, and the leaders. Like the people that set the culture in the locker room and in the building are the only ones that can handle that. And if you've got really good leadership and really good veterans and a really good coach who's great at communication and messaging, I think you can. We'll get into Trotz now, because this is already kind of transitioning into this. One of the things that struck me listening to him talk was he's been wrong about all 3 teams he's been a part of, and that's not a good sign. But he kind of just is open about it. Like, to your point, he just kind of says everything. He thought they were going to have a really high pick after they traded all those pieces, when he was kind of transitioning over the top of David Poile, and that one year that Adam and I actually talked about on Lower Broad Hockey. Go check out that conversation. They thought they were going to like really bottom out that year and maybe have a top 5 pick. They were eliminated in game 81, and he was wrong. He was like, oh, I was wrong. Last year, he did not expect anything out of this team. They expected to be even more of sellers, and he was wrong again about evaluating his team's performance. Went out and got Zucker and Beauvillier and a few other pieces to make an actual push to the playoffs. Very shrewd moves, by the way. Lost in all the bad moves this year is a bunch of the moves he made last year did nothing to hurt the long-term upside of the franchise while also making the team a little bit more competitive last year in a series against Vancouver, was wrong. And then admitted, he was like, look, the last thing I expected to have a problem with this year was scoring goals. That's what he said. So basically he's been wrong evaluating the 3 teams he's been a part of, 2.5, if you want to call it that. And I don't think that necessarily means anything moving forward in terms of his ability to evaluate what's going on. But I think it is worth noting that he's just looked at all 3 teams and sort of prognosticated incorrectly about all 3 of them.
Okay. I mean, yes, but like, I think we cut him some slack on that because I don't think anyone would have predicted what's happened over the last 3 seasons. Like with the 22-23 season, when he kind of came in halfway through, that was when everyone got hurt or traded. You know, Ekholm was gone, Granlund was gone, Jeannot was gone, and then you get Josi and Forsberg, and everyone's all injured, and they bring up all of the young kids. Like, of course, no one expected them to last until game 81 before they got eliminated, but they did. And then the next year, again, everyone was kind of like, oh, first year with Andrew Brunette. Let's see. Let's just see. And they outperformed expectations. Now, of course, you add guys like Stamkos and Marchessault to your roster that already includes guys like Filip Forsberg and Roman Josi. And of course, like, I don't think we put that on Trotz. I don't think anyone was saying back, you know, in July, like, oh, I don't know, Barry, you're going to have enough goals there. Like I don't think anyone would have thought that. So it's like, yes, it's his job to prognosticate, but I don't see how anyone would have prognosticated differently, just from the people that I've talked to around the league too. Like even front office people from other teams are like, dude, what is going on? Like that, it's just shocking to them. And they're not saying, what is Barry doing? They're saying, how did this not work? And that's what we're all kind of wondering.
No question. And Jeff kind of goes back to our previous question. It says, if the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, I think it is better for a team to find its footing and take that momentum into next year. And this is actually something I'm really interested in and I'm going to work on for Lower Broad Hockey, which is I'm going to go back and ask some of the really old guys. Luke Shen and Steven Stamkos and Ryan O'Reilly, guys that have played a lot of hockey. Because I think, to Jeff's point, this is why my mind is going this way. I don't think you have to win games as a team for certain players to gain the momentum they need, if that makes sense. I think learning how to win is very important, but could Fedor Svechkov and Zach LaRue and Adam Wilsby and Spencer Stasny do something over the last 40 games, regardless of the team's record, that gives them confidence and momentum to feel like they belong in the NHL full time next year and come into camp with confidence? I don't think you have to win every game or win 60% of your games for that to happen. I think they need good shifts, night in and night out, to build their confidence, good moments, good periods, good performances, etc. And I'm really interested to know how much that serial winning is helping bring those players along, because there's very 2 different lines of thinking. There's the veteran should be a positive influence, who's a role model, who teaches young guys how to be this and be that. Then there's also this other professional sports thing, which is like, ain't my job to bring you along, dude. Like, your job is to be in the NHL. My job is to do my job. And so I'm curious I want to know who those people were for those guys who've been in the league for 15 years. Like, I want to go ask Luke and those guys and say, look, how did it work for you? When you came up, what happened? And if there was that type of player around you, who was it? And I'd like to know, because I don't think you need to win games. Like, you could still pick 4th in the draft and still have a lot of momentum for a lot of young players that are going to be key pieces next year. Does that make sense? I think.
Yeah. I mean, I see where you're coming from. I also just think that no one is expecting, I don't think anyone's expecting like Ryan O'Reilly to come in and hold Svechkov's hand and say, and, you know, like, okay, little buddy, go fly. Like, I don't think anyone's expecting that, but I think that it's more about just like the work ethic that he brings. And that is what they want. That's what Barry Trotz wants rubbing off on these younger guys, because that, I mean, his motor and his work ethic are really just unmatched. So I don't think it's necessarily about like bringing individual guys along their way. Like, yes, to some degree, like every man for himself a little bit in that regard, but it's more about the work ethic that you need to put in to be a winner. And I think that talking about this direction as a franchise and what you're going to do moving forward. I think that this team is, I've said it before, but this team is too good to be this bad. Like, there's too much talent on this team for the results to be what they are. And so I think that if you're looking ahead, again, even, you talk about the moves that Barry made this year with, Askarov and Carrier and Tomasino and all those guys, like, honestly, I still don't feel like he has leveraged any big important pieces of this team's future. So looking at
Askarov would be the only one.
yeah, but again, it's not like you let him go and you had no backup option.
Yeah.
Like
we don't have to.
yeah. I feel like Ananen has assuaged a lot of concern about that. But I think that now, if you're looking at, do you want to try to win and pick 10th, or do you want to tank and pick 3rd? Like, I think that you still, you have to be realistic about the team that you have now. This team has so much talent on it. You can't expect them to just roll over and just be like, well, guess we're picking 3rd. Like, it's just not going to happen. And I think that you have these guys. None of these guys are on expiring contracts either. So if you go and get pieces, like, yes, you have 3 first-round picks, and that's great. But even looking at like potential trades, whether it's at the deadline or during the offseason, I think if you get guys who, they're not going to be super short-term rentals. If you get guys with a year or two, probably like 2-3 years of term that come with them,
some term, but not too much term, end quote.
Right. Like, I mean, that's it. It makes sense to me. I think.
No, I agree. A couple of good points here by Mr. Brazil, I think is how you say the name. If we can sell, but also find the right long-term player at the deadline to help roll into next year, that makes sense. I agree. And this is also a very valid point. But also, if they do the autopsy at the end of the year and they decide to move on from Andrew Brunette, what we do for the rest of the year doesn't really matter if the scheme and style of play is going to change. Also a totally valid point. So that I don't know about. I feel like if they haven't done it now, and they didn't do it any of the bad losses over the last couple of weeks, it does feel like they're sort of investing in Brunette's plan long term with Trotz. And so that's what that feels like. Who knows? I haven't heard any rumblings. I don't know if you've heard anything. I haven't heard anything about what there will be a total reevaluation and a deep dive at the end of the season, but I don't know. I don't know if that includes changes from the coaching staff. All right, well, let's hear from Elliotte Friedman first before we get into this, because we're already sort of starting to allude to what Trotz said on 102.5 about his trade strategy and what he's looking to do and what he's looking to accomplish. Before we hear from O'Reilly, this was not O'Reilly. That would be weird if he was reporting on his own trade status. Elliotte Friedman on Sportsnet over the weekend. We'll get to that. But Sinkers, Beverages, Shotgun, Willie's Barbecue. Look, if you need booze, non-alcoholic beverages, wine, champagne, liquor, beer, the craft beer walk-in fridge, the craft beer retailer of the year, award-winning liquor store. Just remember the name Sinkers. If you're anywhere near downtown or anywhere near East Nashville or Inglewood, you also have Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville. So just remember those two names, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. They take care of their community. Almost 100 years of doing this, Emma. So they know what they're doing, which is almost as many years as Luke Schen's been playing in the NHL. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Best brisket in the city. It is Black Hawk Farms Wagyu beef brisket. It is exceptional. You don't need any more words from me on this. Go eat it. And then tag Emma on Twitter. Post a picture of it and be like, look how delicious this is. Well, they should be open for your birthday dinner. There you go. All right. So here was Elliotte Friedman over the weekend on Saturday evening. It's like his big, I guess, weekend
Saturday
hit.
headlines.
Yeah, it's like his big thing. There's about a 4-minute. He does about a 4-minute segment. This was the very first minute and 20 seconds of that. This is his report on the Nashville Predators.
Yes, Ryan O'Reilly, when he signed with the Predators before last season, Ron, he signed a 4-year deal. There was no protection in there, trade or no movement clause, nothing like that. And there's been some speculation this year, and I think the Predators have been called about O'Reilly, and the respect that he has across the league is so high, people want to know if he could be available. And here's what I understand the Predators are telling teams. They are saying he may not have protection language in his contract, but he is being treated as if he has a no move clause. I think the Predators' preference is to keep him because they want him to win, especially when they start to put the pieces back together at the end of this year. And also they see him as a leader on and off the ice. However, they are going to at least consider it under two conditions. Number one, the offer has got to be something that really excites them. It really has to be a great offer. And number two, it has to be something O'Reilly would agree to. And as far as I can tell at this point in time, I don't believe O'Reilly has indicated in any way, shape, or form he is looking to move. So with O'Reilly, it's A, it's something that really has to excite Nashville, and B, it would have to be something that he would be comfortable with if it gets to that point.
All right, lots to discuss here because Barry came back, I think, and clarified one of those 2 points actually clarified both of them. His socks will need to be removed by the offer. That's number one. Number two, and I think Adam and I talked about this on the Gold Standard Extra on Lower Broad Hockey on Monday, and Adam was very passionate and very forceful on I do not think that that's the way they should treat a player that doesn't have this. They need to be more shrewd. They need to be more cutthroat. And he referenced sort of Vegas not signing Marchessault, which definitely ruffled some feathers with Jonathan Marchessault, how they handled that sort of contract conversation. And certainly he referenced Tampa Bay Lightning saying, look, bye-bye Stamkos. We're signing Jake Gensel, and we're going to trade for Ryan McDonough, and that's the end of it. Like, sorry, 16 years, Hall of Famer, peace out. And I understand his point on that. And one of my counterpoints to that was, it's good messaging to have it out there that you're a franchise that's going to look out for its players, just in general. And that when push comes to shove, if they get a good enough offer, asking the player first is always just out of respect, a smart move, and it plays well with other players. It plays well with the whole league behind the scenes. Ryan O'Reilly has earned that, in my opinion. But that if the deal is good enough, Barry Trotz is going to do what he thinks is best for the team. And that's what he said yesterday on radio. He said, I'm going to do what I've got to do what I got to do, which is best for what's best for the Nashville Predators. But I do think he's right that if you're going to give up Ryan O'Reilly, who's under contract for another year, you do need a piece that is more a part of the plan than a draft pick, I think. And so if that's a young player with term, a player who's a prospect maybe with some term, I don't know. So number one, your thoughts on moving Ryan O'Reilly at all. Is that something you would do? And then number two, Trotz's clarification, do you feel more comfortable with sort of the caveats around this conversation?
Well, first of all, I found it very amusing on Saturday. So that obviously Elliot has his show on Sportsnet. This gets simulcast on NHL Network in the US because Sportsnet's in Canada. And we were at the Predators game against Washington in the media room watching this live, and the simulcast on NHL Network. NHL Network has like a ticker at the bottom, kind of like ESPN does. And someone in their graphics department needs to figure out how to adjust or maybe remove the ticker for the Elliott segment, because you saw at the bottom of the video there would be like the little heading like Ryan O'Reilly to be treated as if he has trade protection, and the ticker covered half of that, so all you could see was Ryan O'Reilly to be treated as if, which led to a really fun game of Mad Libs in the media room. I liked our answer, treated as if, armed and dangerous, and were a little bit more fun. But that's a side note. I think.
By the way, totally. I don't know. I don't think he still does this, but there's various people that do this for the NHL Network. I believe Adam Vingan was one of them. During the playoffs last year, he was in charge of like doing all the research to put all the stat packs together and then writing out the stats that they put into the ticker. You can all blame Adam, is what I'm saying.
The
unsubstantiated, ticker, blame Adam.
The ticker itself serves a purpose. I think you just need to figure out a way to adjust it so it's not covering up key information. But honestly, in a more serious way, I just saw Ryan O'Reilly treated as if, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. And then when I found out what it was, that it was treated as if he has trade protection, my initial reaction was like, well, duh. Like, of course, like they love him. Barry Trotz loves him.
It's all messaging. It's all messaging, though. I get it. I think that it's just like, on one hand, like you're saying,
it's good to get it out there that you're an organization that treats its players well. He did that with Ryan McDonough with the whole trade request thing, and he's doing it now with this Ryan O'Reilly thing. I also think it's like
a scar off too, technically, right?
Yeah, and he wants to. I'm just saying, like, what would you prefer? Like, I
why do you think
that,
the report's out there in the first place?
Well, because
Barry Trotz wanted it out there.
Yeah, and teams are calling about him, and Barry Trotz loves to tell when teams are calling him about players. Yeah. He's very excited about that.
She texted me so hard last night.
Yeah, but I think you need to understand, obviously, and he clearly does, like, you understand where this team is right now. You're really not in a position to not be taking those calls and at least listening to what these teams have to say. So I think that's what it is. He's answering the phone. He's listening to what they have to say. But I mean, he's also driving a hard bargain. And I think with a player like O'Reilly, you can afford to do that. I think maybe he took the same approach with like Alex Carrier last year, when maybe he shouldn't have. Maybe he should have just, gotten a high draft pick or something for him. But with O'Reilly, I think you can do that, because the last thing you want to do, he's also got to be aware of the fact that trades this year makes it look like he got fleeced or like he's just kind of getting walked all over. So he's not just no GM is gonna be out there, well, except in Vancouver when your best players are fighting with each other. No GM is gonna be like, hey, open for business, come and get them. Like, I think that you have to.
I'd like really underwhelming offers, please.
Known that, like, listen, we know he doesn't have trade protection, but this is a really valuable piece to our organization. Yep. So basically don't even talk to us if you're not willing to part with, to give us a really valuable piece in return, who, in my opinion, like you said, has to have a little bit of term, and it has to be a center, because this team needs centers. There are a lot of teams in the league that need centers. And if you're going to get rid of one, you got to put it back.
Yep. Where Ryan O'Reilly's winning leadership, maturity, and respect would play really well? Vancouver. Just saying. So yeah, he said I got like a 2-year window. This is Trotz. I got like a 2-year window. I want a veteran player, no rentals, with some term, but not too much term, which I think is funny. I think you need to look more at a prospect who is very close to the league. That's what I would look at. Someone who is there's just not many centers out there that is a long-term player that you can go get, who's like 22 or 21 years old that teams are going to give up on for Ryan O'Reilly. And Ryan O'Reilly's really good, but I think you could probably get for someone who is not ready yet and needs a little bit of seasoning, maybe like half a season, right? Or maybe comes up at the end of this year. Someone who's just not quite ready yet and cannot help a team win a cup, where Ryan O'Reilly you can put as the 2C or the 3C and can win a cup right now. It's good for him. It's good for the other team. It's good for the Nashville Predators. That to me is the kind of player I would be targeting. I think Trotz says all those different things to make sure he doesn't put himself into any boxes, right? He's just like, look, we're interested in all these different types of players, with the one caveat being like not too much term and not a rental. But I think a prospect who is highly rated, seasoned, and ready to go, and sort of pretty close to the league, I think is a really good piece to go get. You can get a draft pick and a prospect who's ready. Let's go. Now, so Brazil says Cousins. That's one of those players that there's not a lot of $7 million centers who are like going to be great players for somebody else that are ready to go and that teams are trading. Like, teams don't trade those players away very often. So I know Buffalo's in a different place, but so I don't know. I think you have to take the call. Here's the other thing about O'Reilly. You could trade him in the offseason, and you could trade him at next deadline and probably get just the same kind of return. He's the only one, though, I think, with term that people would want that also has the freedom of movement outside of Jeremy Lauzon. I think Jeremy Lauzon is the one other player that has, because the term is so cheap and because it's $2 million deal and it's 1 year, I think Lauzon's a very legitimate trade chip. I think he should be, having that bag packed. I think Gus Nyquist's bag needs to be packed already. There's no question about that. And as sad as I guess Sissons has term too, I should say. I forgot about that. But those are the three outside of O'Reilly that you think you can move them, add some pieces, add some more depth, add some more prospects, add some more draft picks, add some players. I think Lauzon, Sissons, and Nyquist and O'Reilly help somebody win right now. I mean, that's for sure. The three names plus O'Reilly that you got to be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm not an O'Reilly apologist right now. I'm just saying that I know how this team views him, and I think that it doesn't make sense for him to go anywhere right now. Now, next trade deadline, when he's in the last year of his contract, sure. Yeah. Like, what do you got? Because he's a perfect deadline rental for a contender. And if this team is not contending, if Nashville is contending next year, then you keep them. But I mean, if they're not, then that's when I'm more willing to be like, all right, go see what you can get for him.
I mean, I don't know. We talked about it last week on the show. There's not a lot of spots. If you think Wilsby's going to stick, if you think, Molendyk's coming up next season, yes, Kevin says, Lauzon is now. Do you want some larger players, that can be big and physical, that can, you need that type of guy. And so maybe that's where you keep Lauzon. But I think, honestly, everything's on the table outside of a few select pieces that are clearly a part of the long-term future, right? Like whether it's a young star like a Svechkov or, a high-level prospect like a Molendyk or a Yossi or a Forsberg or a Saros. I think, but outside of the names that we know are sort of off the table, I kind of think you listen to everything. And if somebody comes and says, hey, would Steven Stamkos waive his no-trade clause? This is the other thing that Barry Trotz has been very consistent on, and I think we need to give him a little bit of credit for this. He's been very consistent on, like, we didn't expect this to happen. We're going to try it, but it's not the plan. The plan is we have so many players that are young and talented and developing, and we want to grow them over the course of a 2 or 3 year period of time and then have some space for them when they are ready. That's been his, I mean, say what you want about all the mistakes he's made, but like that's been his plan all along. And they're still on track for that plan. That plan does not include Steven Stamkos long-term. And so,
it never did.
Exactly.
It never did.
Exactly. So if you can, this is also why I think the messaging around this is what I said on Monday with Adam. It doesn't hurt your relationships with the other guys that you would need to approve a trade, i.e. Steven Stamkos, namely, because I think Shea and Marchessault have a chance to sort of stick around the whole length of their contract. It helps your chances to move Steven Stamkos if you are proving to him that you are treating players with respect and honesty and that you'll do what's in their best interest. I know that sounds cheesy and a little naive, but like if you do that, is Steven Stamkos a little more likely to play ball if you've got a good offer on the table that gives you a high-level prospect and a draft pick, and Steven Stamkos can go play for a team that's going to try to contend for a cup this year? I think it helps you. I think it helps you to have that image of as a franchise, and Barry Trotz as the GM. So just another angle to consider.
Yeah, and I think that having that image, and image isn't the best word because that makes it sound like it's all superficial. I think having that reputation among players is very important to Barry as a former coach. And so I think that it's not that he wants to, bro out with the players by any means. I think he just has like a different understanding of their situation, and he wants to be respectful of that and understand that, he treats them as people and not just assets. But again, like you're saying, with the situation this team is in now, you're not doing your job as the GM if you're not listening on everybody. But I also don't think that he's going out there shopping guys because there's no one on this roster right now that he would, I think, actively shop. But it's like, if someone calls and asks about Jeremy Lauzon, hell yeah, pick up the phone, and I think that there's just so many ways to go about it. I think that Barry right now, he's actually in a good situation at the trade deadline because like he can be a little bit more greedy with his asks right now because other teams are well aware of what situation this team is in.
I am always it's funny, like, well, but who's calling on this player? Do we need to call to go sell this player? It's like I'm always amazed by the NFL cut day. When the NFL cuts, every front office in the NFL, all 32, and I'm assuming this is exactly the same in the NHL, every team has to fill a scout team, which I think is 15 players. Is that right? 15 players. And literally the day that every team goes from like 93 players down to 53 players, there's 40 players per team across 32 teams that are all available. And every general manager and front office scouting department has them ranked and knows exactly who they are, what they're good at, what they can and can't do. Do they fit into our system? Guys that are not playing in the league. So to suggest that the rest of the league does not understand Colton Sissons, Jeremy Lauzon, Ryan O'Reilly, Gus Nyquist, like they have a board and they have those names written down already. If you're a team that needs a tall power defenseman who can hit and play left side, they know Jeremy Lauzon's on that list. Like they know him. So I'm always like it's
That's
always like
why that's why pro scouting staffs exist. That is exactly why. That is their job.
By the way, was it you that was? I think it was in your weekly column that you. No, maybe it wasn't. It was the scout that wrote everything by hand about every player, about every position for Calgary who didn't.
That wasn't me.
Dang, I thought that was you. It was just such good writing that I assumed it was yours. Really good story. I don't remember where it was. I don't remember where it was. All right. So, is there any other piece that you would entertain getting rid of, or at least providing value to the franchise to trade away? Do we get them all?
Yeah, no, I think that to me, if you're asking, my number one on that list is Lauzon. But
could you get a first round pick for Lauzon?
No.
Second round pick?
Maybe.
I think you can get a second.
I think you can get a second.
I think it's 2, 3, 4. I think you get a second for Lauzon, a 3 for Sissons, and a 4 for Nyquist. O'Reilly's different. I think you can get like more than all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you could probably end up with a 2, 3, and 4 if you wanted to trade all three of them. I don't know if I'd do that for Sissons, though. If you're trying to win next year, Colton Sissons is still a piece of that puzzle.
And Sissons is still so cheap too. Like there's no reason to like be trying to get rid of him.
Nyquist and Lauzon are the two I would trade.
Yeah.
I think they're valuable. I think they're good players. People know exactly what they're getting. They're willing to pay an accurate price for it. I think
and both make sense as like a missing piece for a contender, because those like true contenders are probably going to be looking for depth pieces. Like if they're contenders now, they're not looking for like, all right, we need a 1C, because if they're already contending, they have that. So I think that they're going to be looking for talented players to fill out depth roles. And that's where Nyquist and Lauzon, I think, could thrive. They have been thrust into these larger roles in Nashville because circumstances have necessitated it. But I think that they would be great additions at the deadline to a team trying to make a final push.
You just need a lot of like second pair big physical defensemen on winning teams to get hurt between now and the trade deadline. I think he's like a number 4 defenseman on a lot of teams, especially one that needs a physical presence. I think Nyquist is absolutely high level secondary scoring, who can play on the power play, who can, great puck entry guy, like, can move the puck around. They're both valuable pieces to a good team. I think you trade them at the deadline. I think you probably keep O'Reilly and Sissons if it's, unless again, the offer is like just extraordinary. So anything else on the trade deadline that you think we should be considering here? Oh, here's the other thing is, I don't know how many players are ready to come up in the last half of the season. Like, I don't know if there are many that are left. I think there's a couple more that could come up, but like they've brought up every defenseman they've got, basically.
Well, they still have Ryan Ufko. I think that determining players' readiness to come up is going to be determined by how the rest of the season goes. Because like if they're just god awful, then sure, bring up Kemmel, bring up guys who like you might as well just let them get their toes wet. But I don't know. Right now, I don't think, if the question is there anyone who's on the Predators roster right now who's blocking a spot from someone that's currently in Milwaukee? No.
Yeah, that's that's kind of the question, and I don't think so, because it seems like Barry Trotz the reason I asked that is Barry Trotz is he's very clear about this, that there needs to be, he always says, as part of his plan for what they're doing and what they're building and all these players that are going to be ready, and some of them they need more seasoning, and it's 2 years down the road. He always adds to the end of that conversation, he always says, and there has to be space for them. We've got to be aware of that part of this of the puzzle too, which makes sense. So, all right, there you go. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Sinkers Beverages. Make sure you support those two great local businesses as they support this product and keep it free for all of you. We do appreciate all your support in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up, notifications turned on, share the show, tell somebody, hey, that Braden guy is not terrible. Emma's cool. Her wisdom is amazing. And they hang out live on Wednesdays at 10 a.m., of course. And if you're listening on the podcast app, we do appreciate that as well. So write a little review. That helps people find us, especially if you put the Nashville Predators in there as well. 5 stars only. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. Otherwise, happy birthday, Emma Lingan.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy. Have a great time. And we'll talk to you next week. How about that? Sound good?
Sounds good.
If you're headed down to the Golden Hall induction today, the luncheon, I'm going to head down there. So if you're there, please, say hello. I'm going to try to get to the game on Thursday night, but I am solo parenting this week and my wife's flight doesn't land in time. I do have a ticket to go. I'm trying to go as a fan because it's going to be a good night to be there. But I really need my wife's flight to land on time. It's what I need.
You got Saturday too. Keith Urban singing the national anthem for his bobblehead night on Saturday.
I couldn't believe that my daughters ended up with Tim McGraw bobblehead, by the way. It was very annoying because his shirts are too tight and it's very awkward on a bobblehead. Anyway, they do think it's funny though, like when you shake it in his head, does the whole thing there. It's their first bobblehead. So anyway. All right. So hope everybody has a great week. Happy birthday to you. And again, if you're out at the luncheon or you're out on Thursday night's game, should be a fun night for Pekka and Shea Weber and David Poile to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So the Predators Hall of Fame, as is the first class, as is created by the organization.
Yes.
All 3 very worthy names, 3 very great personalities in this organization, and they should be celebrated. I'm okay with that. So otherwise, have a good one, everybody. For Emma and Braden, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.